Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast. Hey, future wealth builders, welcome to another episode of the New Wealth Wave podcast, where generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. I'm your host, Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and today we're diving into one of the most important conversations in finance, closing the wealth gap and building generational legacy. Joining me is Tyrone French, founder and owner of Tyrone French and Associates, with more than 34 years of experience as a personal finance coach, business owner, and investor. Tyrone has created a powerful financial wellness system that helps individuals, active duty military, and veterans build perpetual income, achieving financial security and creating lasting wealth. As an accredited financial counselor and host of the Closing the Wealth Gap podcast, Tyrone has dedicated his career to empowering families and communities to take control of their financial futures and pass prosperity on to the next generation. Tyrone, welcome to the podcast.
Dr. Wallace, thank you for that intro. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this podcast.
Today in this episode, we'll explore how his system connects with the 7-stage generational wealth model, especially the stages of financial healing and financial edification, and how understanding your financial genetic code can turn awareness into lifelong impact. Now, if this is your first time tapping into the New Wealth Wave podcast, make sure you hit the subscription button right there below so you can get all the content on our new shows coming up throughout the end of the quarter. The podcast is based on my 7-stage generational wealth model, and let's get into it. Stage 1, we focus on our internal and external ecosystem, walls in and walls out, which creates our inherited financial narratives and encoded financial behaviors. Stage 2, we delve into our financial genetic code, targeting both our financial trauma and anxieties. Stage 3 is all about financial healing, reprogramming our financial genetic code, which is a byproduct of both stages 1 and 2. Stage 4, financial edification. Here, we focus on financial literacy and inclusion. Stage 5, financial well-being, our soft landing, where financial health equals financial wealth. Stage 6 is generational knowledge, which leads us into creating our financial footprints, which leads us to stage 7, generational wealth. Now, before we get into the heavy lifting, Tyrone, I want you to tell all of our listeners out there, and yours as well, who will be tuning into this podcast episode, a fun fact about yourself.
Well, yes, one fun fact for me was I started working at McDonald's when I was 16 years old. I went down and got me a work permit, and I was tired of my dad taking me to Boys Market buying sneakers. The Nike brand had just came out, and I wanted some new Nikes, and I just needed some steady income at that point. So I went to McDonald's, and the rest is history.
So before we get into you saying that you wanted to purchase some Nikes, could you tell us the shoes that you were wearing before that?
Oh, Boys Markets. The Aisle 3 specials.
So
the kind
when I was
that you wear for about a week.
Okay.
Yeah, the kind you wear for about a week, and then the bottom would fall out, and you'd have to put the cardboard inside the bottom of the shoe. And unfortunately, sometimes my socks were a little bit bigger than my foot, so it would hang out the side of the shoe like a tongue. And I just got tired of that look, man. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? That's a funny story, because back in the day, because you can tell how old we are, back in the day,
Yes.
Before Adidas hit the market, I used to wear a shoe called the Winners. Remember the Winners? Made 3 stripes as well. I used to put the cardboard under those as well. Probably last a couple of weeks. So, we're talking about inherited financial narratives, encoded financial behaviors, and our financial genetic code. Basically, that was part of my inherited financial narratives as well. And so one question that we always ask is a 3-part question we ask all of our guests coming on, especially for those for the first time. The first question is, before you became who you are today as an advocate in this space, where were you located on the 7-stage generational wealth model?
That's a pretty easy question, especially with reading your book and being able to recognize the stages. I was stage 2. And not understanding or being able to articulate the financial genetic code, not understanding financial trauma and financial anxiety at the time, I was dealing with the effects, but not understanding the cause. And so I was manifesting and sabotaging myself constantly. So yeah, it's stage two, as far as, the financial trauma and the anxiety, those were my anchors. That's what kept me locked in a perpetual state of poverty.
So, with that being said, we've all had a moment in our lives because we're all in this space because something has happened. What was your aha moment that you said to yourself, you know what, I need to make a change in my life going forward? What was your aha moment?
I can remember this as it was yesterday. I had gotten out of the Navy. I was working for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Company in Long Beach, California. I was a quality assurance administrator, and I was making really, really good money at the time, but it was a demanding job. It was stressful, and I realized I had no leverage. And so I started reading this book. The author's name was Charles Gibbons, Wealth Without Risk. Well, I'm dating myself by, saying that title, but he was talking about multiple streams of income and leverage. And I realized I had neither. At that point, a paycheck, even though I was making really good money, it was singular. And if I wanted to increase my income, I had to increase my hours. And I didn't have enough hours in the day to increase my income to live the lifestyle that I thought I should be living. Even if I did crank up those hours, it would have taken away from the lifestyle. So something had to give. So my aha moment was that I had to become financially literate. I had to get some financial literacy inside of me. And so I made a career change. And back in 1990, I started working for New York Life Insurance Company. And that was the awakening of my financial journey, so to speak, for the beginning of my financial journey.
I want to pin that because you went in to start working for New York Life, and we'll get to the final question, but it's interesting. What did you learn while you was a insurance agent at New York Life?
I understood risk management. I understood the financial planning aspect of it as far as building a financial house. And I understood that the foundation was life insurance. Prior to working for New York Life, life insurance was an afterthought. It was something that I didn't think was necessary for financial planning. But when I started looking at the building blocks, I realized that it was essential for financial planning.
So, with that being said, currently, where are you located on the model today?
Currently, I'm at stage 7. And I'm proud to say that I'm on stage 7 because not only do I look at my assets and intellectual property and entrepreneurial ventures, multiple streams of income, knowing that I'm passing down wealth to the next generation. You're familiar with this term, shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in 3. I didn't want all of the work that I've done to dissipate after the 3rd generation or even the 2nd generation because I'm first generational wealth. And my family, I'm the producer, and I'm the guy that's out in front. I'm the tip of the spear. But what I realized is that the spear, the handle was weak. It can't do any good if it's just in your hand. So my handle had termites, and I had to make sure that I got those termites out of there and got the right foundation in place to make sure that this legacy continues on. So I do it with financial literacy, financial knowledge, and education to my kids and also to my grandkids.
It's interesting because you recited a quote that I used in the book as well. One of the areas that I've focused on is basically suggesting, because you are first generation, as you mentioned, is that by the 3rd generation, 10% of the wealth that you've earned will be left to the grandchildren. Typically, that's what the numbers suggest. And then 30%
Yeah.
to your kids. So that's so important because as first generation, we have to be in a position to transfer that knowledge, so to speak, which I believe is just as important as the assets. As we've known, we've read about it, we've understood that many individuals have earned and made it, so to speak, but have not been able to transfer their assets because of the lack of knowledge. So I'm glad that you mentioned that you are at stage 7 at this point in your life, because now it's your job to transfer that information, which is great. Future Wealth Builders, we are here with Tyrone French, founder of Tyrone French and Associates, and he's going to give us a great episode this afternoon. So, Tyrone, let's get into the questions itself. So, first and foremost, you spent more than 3 decades helping families, veterans, and everyday investors close the wealth gap. When you read Generational Wealth Begins with Generational Knowledge, what message or principle from the book connected most with your life's work in financial wellness and empowerment?
That's a great question because a lot of times when we look at financial planning or estate planning, we think about ourselves first. We think about our lifestyle, and it's easy to accomplish these things once we get our mindset straight and we have goals and action steps. It's a fairly simple process to make money. I mean, it's really simple once you know how to do it. The problem is we don't leave footsteps or footprints behind. And so when you look at the African American community, there's one word that we lack, and that's inheritance. And in order to keep generational wealth, because it's a journey, it's not a process, it's not something that you start and stop. This is something that has inertia. It's something that's going to continue on. And so knowing that you're leaving a legacy behind, which are those footprints, it's nice to have a blueprint, a manual that says, hey, look, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to memorize all of this stuff, but you need to understand where to go to get the information and how to apply it. So for me, the steps as far as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge plays a huge role versus just accumulating the wealth. Because like I said, once you know how to do it, wealth is simple. It really is a simple process, but it's the education and those footprints that are left behind that will determine whether or not that wealth continues on to the second and third, even fourth and fifth generation.
So the book introduces the financial genetic code and inherited financial narratives, which explore how our past influences our financial present. How do you see these concepts showing up in the clients and communities you serve?
First of all, I do want to commend you on writing this book. This is a book that I think every consumer should have in their library. Every financial advisor that calls himself a financial advisor, I mean, that is serious about their trade and their profession, should read this book. Because again, a lot of clients have misconceived notions based on what wealth is and what it's going to do and how to even get started. But if they don't have the proper mindset, then they're dealing with a financial genetic code of having all this past trauma. It doesn't matter how much wealth you accumulate or how you begin to increase your income, you're going to sabotage yourself. When you're growing up, and I'm going to speak for myself. I came from a household that was struggling. I remember those colored food stamps, which you mentioned in the book, and going to the counter at the supermarket and being embarrassed, wanting my parents to pay as quickly as possible because I didn't want people to see that we were using food stamps. And fast forward to my adulthood. When I joined the Navy, I had a guaranteed paycheck coming in every single week. Based on my trauma, what I did not want to do was look poor. So the first thing I started doing was spending money on clothes, cars, jewelry. I wanted to have the illusion of prosperity and of wealth, even though I didn't have it. And so that grew old for me really fast because I had the style, but no substance. I was lucky enough to realize that when I was still in my early 20s versus hitting my 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s and realizing, hey, I was looking good, but going nowhere fast. So your book is a roadmap that articulates, hey, look, you need to get your mindset together before you start this journey because the path that you're on right now is just not about you. It's about people that you haven't even experienced yet that's going to come behind you that you're going to one day call a loved one. You want to put them in the best position possible to succeed financially. In order to do that, you need to have mental toughness. And your book articulates the steps perfectly to whereas you don't have to be a rocket science. You just need to follow the steps and get comfortable with each step. And then one day you find yourself at step 7. And when it's time for you to throw that last pitch in that last game, you know you did your best. And at the bottom line, that's all you can do.
You know, I've been asked, I've been on several podcasts lately because of the book, and I've been asked the question, when do you actually remove yourself from the 7-stage generational wealth model? And I say, the only time you successfully, well, I'm not going to say successfully, when you leave the model is when you transition from Earth, right? Right. That's when you actually leave because so many things can happen during your lifetime. As you mentioned, you go clockwise, you can go counterclockwise. Your present is where you're at today. In one area, and I love how you mentioned how you believe that if you are a financial advisor, you should pick up this book. I would say this, if you're part of the 5 financial professionals, you should have this book because you need to understand your own personal financial genetic code. Because you know as well as I do, oftentimes than not, we transfer our financial genetic code subconsciously to our clients because we're in the business for some reason and we transfer that to our clients. That's why oftentimes you find, especially within marginalized communities, that it's hard for them to work with a financial advisor or one of the 5 financial professionals because they have to trust, because they can come off as salesmen, commissions, so to speak, not listening to what you are trying to accomplish. So that's so important when you mention the individuals should read the book. Why do you think they will not read the book? Because there's a few that will not read it. Why do you think they will not read the book? Talking about the professionals.
Because you get this attitude sometimes based on your company's training. You feel like, you're trained and you're going to follow their roadmap based on their level of success. Because a lot of times it's based on production. We're just going to keep it real. It's based on production. So you don't go outside of those lanes. But if you're really focused on having a better product and having a better relationship, when I say having a better product, I mean understanding the product for your clients and being able to transfer that knowledge and that information to that client so that now they have a better understanding to whereas they don't fully recognize the process. But like you said, there's a trust factor to kick in to whereas they know that you understand it. So they're basically putting their financial lives in your hand. That's going to help to assist them to get to the next level. But like I said, if you have those blinders on just based on your company's material, a lot of times you're not going to pick up an outside reference that's going to help you to shorten that learning curve to whereas you begin to realize there's another way of doing this. And if I can get this and have a better way of communicating this with myself and I understand it, then I can pass that on to my clients. So not just me as the advisor on reading this book, because a lot of times people look at the advisor and think, well, this person's really smart, or how did they get there? How did they get that knowledge? To be able to say, hey, there's a book out there that anybody can read that's really helped me to understand my finances and my situation based on my legacy, I think you should read this book. This book, it's not what most people think. Most people think when they look at a financial book and you're talking about wealth, you're looking at something that's a book that's really technical. That's not this book. This book breaks it down to whereas, in my opinion, anybody can understand these concepts. And especially being able to have a resource where they can tap into to get their questions answered, that's gold to me. That's gold.
You've also written a book as well. Tell us about your book.
Well, I wrote a book back in 2017 called Closing the Wealth Gap. And the reason I wrote that book, Closing the Wealth Gap, is because, again, I started out at New York Life Insurance Company. And we were going after the top 5% of income earners. And I realized early on in my career that the top 5% is a difference between the top 4% and the top 1%. I just put them all together to equate the top 5%. Early on in my career, I realized they were going to be fine. It's the other 95% that are struggling financially that are still dealing with those tired paradigms and that the mindset that's keeping them locked into that cycle of gloom and doom and poverty to where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning that they project it. When it manifests, it validates the projection. So I wanted to go into that 95% and break that cycle, break that paradigm. And so your book, like I said, when I came across your book, it's just an excellent tool to help the other 95% that had just based on economics alone, they had the discretionary income to put themselves in a better financial position. They just don't understand the process and how to do it.
Future Wealth Builders, we're here with Tyrone French, founder and owner of Tyrone French and Associates, this afternoon on the New Wealth Wave podcast. And if you have not picked up my book, Generational Wealth Begins with Generational Knowledge, it is an Amazon bestseller. Make sure you pick it up. The link is in the description as well. Mr. French, much of your work focuses on closing the wealth gap, as you mentioned earlier, through education and access. How do you see this book helping bridge the same gap, especially for those who felt left behind out of traditional financial conversations?
Well, yeah, my book focuses on acquiring perpetual income, building financial security, and creating generational wealth. So based on the 7 stages, it encompasses those 3 things that I talked about. My book is more like a how-to as far as why you need life insurance as a foundation for your financial house, and then pivots into savings and investments. So most people in that 95% category, they're not even in a position to start investing. Why? Because they're bogged down with a lot of debt. And so they may have aspirations to be entrepreneurial, but a lot of times they think that they have to borrow money in order to start that business venture. And so again, I ask, you're borrowing this money, you're already in debt. What happens if you pass away during the process and the process has completed itself? Now your legacy is leaving generational debt to your family. And now you could have been the best husband, the best brother, uncle, the best nephew in the world. But when you're gone, when you pass away, the last thing they're going to remember is the position you left them in. So life insurance, again, is one of those core elements based on foundational, to whereas you can live payday to payday and still leave an income tax legacy for your family as an inheritance. And again, that's not expensive. When people understand that something is within their grasp, just like in your book, you explain the different types of life insurance. You're not selling life insurance, but based on that financial knowledge, you're explaining the difference between various products. Which again, if you're dealing with a salesman, a lot of times they're not going to break that down based on what you're comfortable with as far as your understanding of it. But if you have this book and you get a basic understanding of it, when you're speaking to that financial advisor or that professional, you have a better understanding or more irons in the fire to that conversation, that you understand what's being articulated. Then you can make an educated decision based on what's best for you and your family and your situation. So yeah, my book, Closing the Wealth Gap, is more like a primer, a starting point, and then launching yourself into eventually at that stage 7.
So, Tyrone, from your perspective, how has financial literacy evolved, and where do you think we still fall short today?
We're not doing very well, in my opinion, because a lot of people regurgitate the same old tired notions that, you need to stock up on mutual funds and dollar cost average. And without talking about your financial time horizon, they're not looking at fees, and they're not even talking about inflation. So you can have a product that say, well, I'm going to buy this annuity. 9 times out of 10, a lot of people don't know what annuity is. They don't know that it's a stream of cash, or it can be uneven or even streams of cash. So you purchase this annuity thinking that it's going to be your be all in retirement. And lo and behold, they never taught you about inflation and how you have a fixed income now. And based on inflation, that money is not going to have the same purchasing power 10, 20, 30 years down the road. But again, you don't find that out until 10, 20, 30 years down the road, which is the bad part. So again, to me, it's the concept. The alphabet A to Z is the same. The issue is the person that's pulling the letters and the symbols out, that's forming the words, that's creating the sentence for the paragraph that has the page. If you don't understand the A and the Z, you're going to have a hard time understanding the words in the sentence. A lot of experts or professionals, they tend to regurgitate the same phrases over and over again, not knowing, and it sounds good. And a lot of people, a lot of consumers, they don't want to look silly, or they don't want to look ignorant. So a lot of times they'll agree because it sounds good, but there's no application involved. So for us as professionals in the financial planning field, we got to get to the point where there's more activity, because you can start out with a small dollar amount. With the right activity and the compounding effect, you can end up with way more in resources, just based on the book called The Millionaire Next Door, which is slow and steady using compound interest and dollar cost averaging. Then it makes sense. But if you're just putting those concepts out there and there's no activity, we're just going to keep on repeating the same cycle over and over and over from generation to generation. And the rich are going to continue to get rich, and the poor and the middle class are going to continue. That gap is just going to get wider and wider.
That's a great point, because when I wrote the book, one area that I really wanted to focus on was to not sound like everyone else. We're in a genre right now, or a time, if you will, if you're looking at it from a marketing perspective, that it's an oversaturated and fragmented market, meaning that anyone and everyone is speaking about it. The barriers to entry are low. It's not high barrier to entry. It's not even medium barriers to entry at this point. Anyone can talk about finance in whatever direction, how they want to go. And so I made it a conscious effort to use words and phrases that haven't been used before. As you mentioned, the financial genetic code. I mean, that's something that no one's used before. We trademark that so that we know we own that. Inherited financial narratives, encoded financial behaviors. Those are the things that I wanted to bring to the table, because I wanted this book in particular, to be an evergreen topic, an evergreen book that would never, ever be out of play. So it doesn't matter where you're at. You can take this book and 30 years from today, it's still going to be applicable. And so that was the importance of it all, because I wanted to differentiate myself from all the other individuals who are speaking on this topic. So it took some time to write. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's so important. How do you differentiate yourself from a market which is oversaturated and fragmented? If you look at the product life cycle, we're probably in the maturation stage, probably going towards some sort of declination stage. So you have to reinvent yourself, product extension, so to speak, to continue to elevate that curve. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I think we was able to do that as well. So, I mean, people like yourself speaking about it, we have a lot of positive comments on the book itself. I am appreciative of that. So, one of the key stages in my 7-stage model is financial healing, which focuses on repairing the emotional and behavioral wounds that prevent growth. In your work with closing the wealth gap, how do you help individuals and families move from financial pain and fear to confidence and long-term empowerment?
Before I answer that question, I want to go back to your book as far as that financial genetic code. Sounds technical. When you look at the cover of this book and look at the back of the book, just glancing through it, you can tell that somebody with a PhD wrote this book. You
I
can
would
tell,
hope.
and just because again, you read the book that I would have written. If I had time to sit down and do the research and pull all the material together, this is a book that I would have wrote myself. But again, you can tell that a PhD wrote the book. You can tell that somebody that has a degree in economics wrote this book. You can tell that somebody that has an MBA wrote this book. But the difference is that not only do you know that a PhD wrote this book, but it's almost like the PhD took their arm and put it around your shoulders to the marginalized community and said, look here, man, come here. There's a lot of noise out here, but this is the information that you need. This cuts through the chase. This is going to tell you how to get from point A to point Z, and it's going to put the ball in your court. So you're going to understand now, you're saying that you want to do these things. I put the tool in your hand to allow you to create that legacy that you want. Now it's up to you to act on it. If I had written the foreword to this book, that's what it says. Here, man, you can do this too. You don't have to be the person that's window shopping, your face up against the glass with your hands up by your face, locking in on something that you, one day I'm going to do this. No, this book allows you, like the store owner opens up the door and allows you to come in and say, hey, this is what you want. Let me show you how to get it. And then they bag it up and you're walking out the door with this newfound resource in your bag. And now you can't wait to tell your wife and kids and grandkids what you did. That's, to me, is the epitome, the emphasis of your book, the simplicity of it. So again, to answer your question, all I do is give people the permission to start the process and to see the growth. That's all my system does. Because a lot of times people, they'll go to the gym and they're working out and they don't see in themselves, they don't see the difference. But a lot of times other people see the difference based on how you carry yourself, how you're walking. Now you're walking with purpose, or you're going to the gym with purpose. Your attitude changes. Your exterior, meaning what you're wearing now, begins to change. And other people will recognize that and say, hey, have you lost weight or what, something to that effect? Well, my systems are in place to help people start the process and then give them kudos based on them seeing the growth. And when people see that, they continue on, meaning that in the beginning, they're motivated. So my book motivates you to get going, but towards the end, it inspires you. Meaning that first it was external, now it became internal. And now you're doing these things because you want to do it. And again, with purpose, with the intent or the belief that, hey, I can do this too.
We're definitely going to leave a link in the description to your book as well as your website. You have a phenomenal website, by the way. Just want to let you know that. And so we're going to definitely leave that information in the description itself. So, and you're going to be the first one that's going to participate. So we don't know how this is going to go, but this is a new segment to the New Wealth Wave podcast, and it's called the Legacy Lightning Round. You like that?
Whoa.
So these are some questions that I'm going to give you. These are one-word legacies that you're going to give me back. Well, within one word, one sentence, okay? So the first one is, if you could describe your life's financial philosophy in one word, what would it be?
My philosophy in one word?
What would it be? I'll give you a couple of words.
Well, I tell you, if I can explain it in one word, it would be consistency.
Okay.
Consistency.
The second question, what one lesson about money you wish every young person could learn before they earn their first paycheck?
Pay yourself first.
I like that one.
Create the habit of paying yourself first.
Let me put a pin in that one. That was the hardest decision that I ever made was to pay myself first. And I started that process in 2019. Very difficult. And when I meet with clients, I tell them the importance of paying yourself first. And it's so difficult to do because you're used to paying all of your disposable income first, everything first, all of your needs, and then you do your wants. Then I always say, well, at the end of the day, when the money that you have left for yourself, it's not that much. So the first thing you need to do when you get your check is allocate a consistent amount of money to your account, 10%, 5%. I like 10% first. Then you take care of your disposables, and then you have your wants as well. So that's a great piece of advice. I
Well,
like
Doc, if
that.
I can tell you one thing, a lot of times people grapple with the choice. It's the
Yes,
choice that's agonizing. That's the duration based on the process. But once you make the decision is instantaneous.
I agree. I agree. It becomes habit, so to speak. What one mindset or behavior you believe people must unlearn to start closing the wealth gap in their own lives?
It's the poverty mindset. The poverty mindset has to be unlearned. And the thing is, it breaks my heart to drive around in marginalized communities and to see, because I understand the visuals of it. I understand the false narratives that are being rehearsed inside of your head over and over again. That is, money is tight, money is scarce. I got to get 2 or 3 jobs in order to maintain where I used to be. But again, it's a poverty mindset. So to shift from that poverty mindset to the abundance mindset, where you begin to see the opportunities every day. First of all, the day itself is the opportunity for you to take one step and then another step and then another step. So it's the changing that poverty mindset that has to be corralled and ripped out and replaced with the abundant mindset.
Another one for you. If you could hand every family 3 tools to start building generational wealth, what would they be? 3 tools.
3 tools. First tool I would use is my book, Closing the Wealth Gap. The second tool I would use is to give them my app. It's a mobile app, to whereas not only does it talk about financial literacy, but it gives them the tools also as far as calculators, articles to put everything in place. And then the third tool would be coaching, meaning that now you have a go-to person that whereas you don't have to do this alone.
Final question for you. When people think of Tyrone French from years from today, what do you hope they remember most about your impact?
That's real easy. My name is Tyrone French, but my business is Closing the Wealth Gap. And that's what I do. I want them, when they think Tyrone French, I want them to think Closing the Wealth Gap. Because again, it's a mindset. I see the wealth gap. Some people think it's a chasm, but it's actually a race. It's actually like being on a track. And Dr. Wallace, when I first started, I was so far behind, I thought I was first. Thought I was doing well. And all of a sudden I realized I had been lapped. I had been lapped 400 times. And so even if you get to the point where, let's say if the person that you're in a race with and they're 10 laps in front of you, they can stop and tie their shoe and, get a drink of water, read a book. And by the time you're on lap 5, they can start again and still be in front of you. So I realized that the race is based on laps, and the laps are the generations. Once we get to the point where we understand that we're in this race and that we don't have to do it all by ourselves, and we don't have to try to, go from lap 10 to lap 50, like the Indianapolis 500. It's 500 laps in that race. How many times do you think they change the tires and receive fuel in that race? So you got to look at it the same way. As long as you have a good crew, a good pit, and you have the resources to get from point A to point B, you're going to finish the race. You may not win, the Indianapolis 500 that year, but you finished the race. And over time, you're getting better and better and better. And by the third generation, your family's got all the trophies because they learned how to win the race.
Absolutely. It's definitely a marathon. So before we leave, could you give our listeners your contact information, your socials? How, if they want to get in contact with Tyrone French, how would they do so?
Well, actually go to TyroneFrench.com. If you have Chat GPT or, you can Google Tyrone French and Associates. But the best way to find me is TyroneFrench.com. I have a mobile app. So you can really just download my app. Go to TyroneFrenchApp.com and you'll have my entire business in the palm of your hand. But you can also just pick up the phone and call me. Call me toll free, 877-296-5192. There's somebody on that line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you just want to, leave me a message or just cuss me out, it's toll free. So 877-296-5192. Be happy to start a conversation with you.
Future Wealth Builders, Tyrone, what an impactful and timely conversation. I want to thank you for sharing your decades of experience and for the powerful work you're doing to help individuals and families close the wealth gap. You've reminded us that financial empowerment goes far beyond numbers. It's about mindset, education, and intentional action that leads to lasting change. And to our listeners, if today's conversation spoke to you, I encourage you to grab a copy of my book, Generational Wealth Begins with Generational Knowledge. It's more than a book. It's a blueprint for understanding our financial genetic code, reprogramming inherited financial narratives, and creating a foundation for generational prosperity. And to Tyrone French, on behalf of myself, our producer, Ray Haycraft, and the entire New Wealth Wave community, thank you for continuing to lead by example and showing us that closing the wealth gap starts with knowledge, healing, and purpose-driven action. And as we always say here on New Wealth Wave Podcast, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And I'll see you on the next episode of the New Wealth Wave Podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave Podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave Podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave Podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the New Wealth Wave Podcast.